Welcome back to COMR 103 Speaking and Listening. This is Chapter 17, dealing with Group Presentation Dynamics. Okay, so there could be a possibility in the future where you will have to make a group presentation, not an individual, but a group presentation. And this chapter goes through the details of what it would take to put on a really good group presentation. On this first slide, the group dynamics definition is very important. It's a process. It's a combination of all individuals on the team that impact the interaction amongst the team itself as a whole. So if you are selected or you are assigned to a team to do a presentation, it is imperative that all, let's say, for example, all four of you on the team get together, talk about the project, know exactly what piece of the presentation you're going to have, and make sure that everybody on the team understands each person's responsibility, because you just never know when it comes down to the time to present. If one person's ill, then another person on the team needs to pick up the slack and fill in for that person who's ill and continue on with the presentation. So group presentations are not as simple as they sound, but you do have a smaller role in it, because if it's a 15-minute presentation and you have four people on the team, your role is only 4 minutes, whereas in an individual presentation of 15 minutes, you'd be the one on stage for the entire 15 minutes. So group dynamics goes through some stages, and the chapter talks about 4 stages that you go through in group development. The first one is forming, and the forming stage is right when you're first assigned to a team. You start figuring out each other's strengths, weaknesses, figuring out who wants to do what, and then once you get through that stage, the initial stage, then you go into a very critical one called storming phase. The storming phase is where ideas and brainstorming and concepts are introduced. There may be some conflict between team members, but you work your way through that particular process. Then third, you come into the norming stage. Here, everything starts coming together, right? It's like putting a puzzle together. All the pieces start fitting. You assigned each person their responsibility. You may have one person who's doing the introduction, 2 people who are doing the main part of the body, and then maybe one person doing the conclusion. And then finally, the performing stage is really the final stage of the presentation, which is where all 4 of you will get up. You'll present a 15-minute presentation, and everybody knows each other's roles, and they transition between each one of them, and it looks smooth. So as you get through these 4 stages of group development, it makes the final stage look really good. So here's the chapter talks about some of the responsibilities you should take on in these group presentations. The first one is the first person up, which is very important because that person sets the stage for the presentation. That person will be assigned to speak first. They will introduce the topic, give an overview of what's to expect during the presentation, and then that person will then introduce the next presenter that will be coming up on stage. When that person comes up, very simply, they'll discuss their main point or whatever they're there to discuss, and then they will then transition and introduce the next person, but also maybe give a little bit of an overview of what that person is going to talk about. So then the third person comes up, talks about, let's say, the next main point. They discuss that for about 3 to 4 minutes, and then they will then turn it over to the final presenter, which is your 4th person on your team, and they will wrap things up. They will conclude the presentation. They will do a summary of the main points that were covered by each individual, and then they will wrap it up and then ask for any questions. So this slide talks about that all members need to work individually as a team to make sure that you pull off this group presentation. And then you, very simply, all 4 of you would then answer questions from the audience after the presentation is done. So again, it's similar to an individual presentation. It's just that you're breaking it up into parts and each person knows their part, but you also work together and you blend it together so it's seamless throughout the group presentation. So I'm hoping Chapter 17 has given you some ideas. If you're ever selected or ever appointed or have to do a group presentation anywhere, maybe at your workforce or maybe in a classroom setting in a ground campus, at least you now know some techniques to use to do a great group presentation. All right, and I'll see you on my next video.